What is an American? Throughout American history, the slow acceptance of African American soldiers into positions in the military was one filled with volatility. It began slowly with the debate of the enlistment and basic privileges of blacks in the late 18th to 19th century to support army numbers and conflicts. This followed into the gradual desegregation of the military and lessening of prejudice in the 20th century. African American soldiers fought in every single war in American history with the aim of establishing acceptance before equality. It all started in the 1700s during the American Revolution, with 5,000 African Americans in the U.S. military. General George Washington, commander of the Continental Army and a slave owner, prohibited African American soldiers, fearful of rebellious uprising. But he eventually gave in to preserve the future of the nation when white soldiers weren't enough. The first black U.S. military regiment, named the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, recruited 140 African American soldiers from early 1778. Washington's views shifted as he saw 5,000 black soldiers fight for the American cause. As profits from his plantations plummeted, he thought, was it just? As a result, he decided to emancipate his slaves. The first Militia Act of 1792 banned African American soldiers. However, a lack of soldiers in the War of 1812 led to 2 black regiments serving in the conflict. During the Battle of Lake Erie in 1813, the Navy also enlisted African Americans. For African Americans, enlistment not only meant potential freedom, but the opportunity to demonstrate their patriotism and love of country. On April 12, 1861, Confederates attacked Fort Sumter and the Civil War began. In response, Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to crush the Southern Rebellion in 90 days. The war lasted a lot longer, and mandatory conscription increased as the conflict escalated. On July 17, 1862, Lincoln failed to recruit 300,000 soldiers. Faced with similar problems, the Confederacy tried to draft men ages 17 to 50 with the Conscription Act in April 1862. For both sides, enlisting African Americans would help absolve the manpower deficiency. Frederick Douglass, a former slave and abolitionist, argued for the allowance of black service. Can he not wield a sword, fire a gun, march and counter-march, and obey others like any other? The Union passed the Second Confiscation and Militia Act in July 1862, allowing Lincoln to employ as many persons of African descent as he may deem necessary and proper for the suppression of this rebellion. It also allowed African Americans into federal service for citizenship, but not yet into combat. Prejudice remained an obstacle to the solution, however. Republican Senator Ted Ike says he doubts whether his fellow citizens would fight for their countryside side by side with colored men. Similar doubt and opposition came from the Confederate side. Robert Toombs, former Secretary of State and General for the Confederacy, called the enlistment of blacks to fight the worst calamity that could befall us. On January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, allowing African Americans to officially fight as soldiers in the Union. At this time, extensive drafts caused outrage as the upper classes were able to pay to escape the draft, unlike the working class. The New York draft riots happened when working class men slaughtered black men who were exempt from the draft as they weren't considered citizens. William Sherman, Union general and opposer of black soldiers, stated, "I won't trust Negroes to fight yet. I have no confidence in them, and I don't want them mixed up with our white soldiers." Despite this, free black men of the Union still joined the military. In February 1863, more than 1,000 responded to the first call of black soldiers. William Carney, who risked his life as one of the first black men to serve as a flag bearer, a role of incredible honor, stated, "When the country called for all persons, I could best serve my God, serving my country and my oppressed brothers." Before the battle on October 15, 1863, black soldier Isaiah Welch wrote, If I fall in the battle anticipated, remember, I fall in defense of my race and country. Both soldiers and 180,000 other black troops were accepted and demonstrated patriotism. However, the military was still racially segregated by regiments. No black and white fought together. In addition, a new dispute arose: equal pay rights. Sylvester Ray led black soldiers to refuse to fight until they were equally paid, to which Congress eventually agreed to in 1864. As the American Civil War drew to a close, William Carney and several other African American soldiers received the Congressional Medal of Honor for their service. Black soldiers were also able to remain in the military, unlike before. This is shown by the Buffalo Soldiers in 1866, a permanent all-black regiment with the first black commissioned officer, Henry Flipper, leading the men. This was a significant milestone in which a black man could command his own regiment. On January 31st, 1865, Lincoln passed the 13th Amendment to abolish all slavery, finally integrating the black slaves into society. Though the Civil War era military was rife with discrimination, it ended with African Americans being permitted to serve the country again on the battlefield, allowing them to fight as Americans, taking a step towards acceptance, a step towards equality. After the ratification of the 13th Amendment, the Jim Crow laws, or the Black Codes, segregated and discriminated against blacks, limiting their rights and exploiting them as a labor source. They lost status in society, but their role in the military prospered. After the United States declared war against Germany in 1917, Congress passed the Selective Service Act. All male citizens ages 21 to 31 were drafted. African American males eagerly joined to earn rights and prove their worthiness for equality. From July 18th to August 6, 1918, the All-Blacks 369th Infantry Regiment, nicknamed the Harlem Hellfighters, assisted the French 161st Division in driving the Germans from their trenches during the Aisne Marne counter-offensive. The Harlem Hellfighters were able to experience equality during their time in France. They received recognition and they earned the nickname Men of Bronze. In 1948, President Truman finally issued an executive order to desegregate the military. Strom Thurmond, a U.S. Senator, opposed, commenting, "All the bayonets of the army cannot force the Negro into our homes, into our schools, our churches, and our places of recreation." Many regiments refused desegregation, and all black units continued until 1954. In 1989, President George Bush selected General Powell to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Thus, Powell was the first African American to serve as the highest-ranking military officer in the U.S. Armed Forces. Despite all these advancements and progress made in the military, we are still far from true equality. Today, black soldiers are 61% more likely to be court-martialed and tried for offenses. Though blacks accommodate for 17% of the military, only 9% of officers are black. Still, the acceptance of blacks into the military was an integral stepping stone towards efforts for equality in the future. It allowed integration and the eventual desegregation of the military in the 1950s. It led to a higher quality of life and faster integration into society for decommissioned soldiers after the war. African Americans' acceptance into formerly white positions is only the first in the journey to true equality.
Serve the men and women of the armed forces and to serve our nation. I'm very pleased to be joining your national security team. I look forward to working with you, the Vice President, and all the members of the team.
The result was a landslide. Barack Obama easily held onto democratic strongholds and secured almost all of the key disputed states like Florida, Ohio, and Virginia. Although the difference in the overall vote was only about 5 points.